So I want to introduce Evîn Cheikosman from the World Economic Forum and Zygy from KlimaDAO. You will probably be told what a DAO is today.
KlimaDAO.
KlimaDAO. Oh, KlimaDAO. KlimaDAO. Only one of us has slides, so we're going to let Evîn kick us off and set the tone, and then we'll get into our discussion. I don't know that we're going to have time for Q&A. We'll try. If we don't, we're going to be in the breakout session in 45 minutes, and we can answer questions then. So, Evîn, you want to kick us off with some slides?
Of course. So is this the thing?
I think it's the thing.
Yeah? Okay. Great. I mean, I think that I'm short enough for this, so I think we're in good luck right now. Okay, so thank you so much for having me. This is such a pleasure to be in such great company and following such excellent speakers. My name is Evîn Cheikosman. I am a policy analyst for the World Economic Forum's Crypto Impact and Sustainability Accelerator, also known as CISA, which operates out of our offices in the Presidio. So I've been asked to give a 5-minute snapshot into crypto's climate impact. And rather than go into the technicalities that abound this topic, which I'm sure we'll get into later on in today's program, I just wanted to provide some important context and just baseline data for us. So I'm assuming that most of us here today are coming into this topic around crypto and climate from a privileged developed market perspective. And that's pretty standard when it comes to coverage of this topic by Western elites, investors, and journalists as well. But what tends to go missing from this conversation really is crypto's societal merit and the economic benefits that it has unlocked for so many people, over half of the global population, rather, living under a varying spectrum of monetary oppression. So if we just take a look at where we stand today, you'll see that highlighted in green, only 20% of the global population of about 7.9 billion people have access to the basic tenets of a liberal democracy. That is freedom of expression and belief, access to private property, and a relatively stable economic system. That means that highlighted in purple and yellow, more than half of the world's population lives in a partly free society or under some form of authoritarianism with little to no equal protection of civil liberties and economic freedoms. Further compounding this issue is the fact that 1.2 billion people live under 2 to 3 digit inflation. Crypto actually has the potential to provide some sort of an access out of that, to provide some sort of help in terms of addressing those injustices, especially the economic suppression that we see. So if we just take a look at where crypto is most highly concentrated, you'll notice that it is based in a lot of emerging countries. And if we just take the top 10 countries and compare it to the universal average, according to Chainalysis, a lot of those countries just have inferior monetary freedom, really low access to property rights, low investment freedom, and just weak rule of law. And that drives a lot of people to adopt crypto as a means to preserve their savings, send and receive remittances, and be able to purchase basic essential goods. And I'll just add that according to crypto.com, there are about 300 million crypto users worldwide, and over, I think that number is about to hit 1 billion by the end of this year. So I'll just add that when I'm think about how crypto and climate is really going to evolve, I think that as adoption of this technology just continues to grow, and as it becomes mainstream in developed countries, just as it is in developing countries, we're going to see this conversation start to reorient towards how crypto can potentially accelerate progress towards global environmental sustainability goals. And there's a lot of work already being done in this space to make that happen. And I think that is a given. But if we just take a look at this topic from more of a geopolitical perspective and taking into account Russia's invasion of Ukraine, surging energy energy prices as a consequence to that, and just plummeting energy security. I think it'll just be really interesting to actually see how crypto can be able to help achieve some sort of energy independence in what is evolving into a deglobalizing world, and how this technology can perhaps enable more of a acceleration into measurable and responsible decarbonization. So when that happens, I think that that will just further sunset what has become an ideological debate about crypto's energy consumption and just the overall politicization of finance. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you all so much for your attention, and I think we can just dive right in.
Yeah, I think that it's a really important perspective and one that you don't hear very often, in that, you know, cryptocurrency is a global technology, not a local one. But I would push back a little bit, or maybe reset, and just, you know, to be clear, like, crypto does have a climate problem. It uses a lot of energy, at least as currently conceived. You know, I've got varying estimates, most of which I don't trust, but one of them that's oftenly quoted says that Bitcoin mining uses as much energy as the entire country of Sweden, give or take a couple of gigawatts. The thing that I find disturbing is that I live in upstate New York. About 45 minutes away from me at Seneca Lake, there was a coal-fired power plant that was shut down, that recently reopened as a natural gas power plant, not to deliver power to the local community, but to power 20,000 Bitcoin mining servers. And it is now running 24/7, just mining Bitcoin, and polluting with very little consequence. So I think that problem needs to be addressed too. But I think maybe this is where I'd kick to Cy, who is conversely taking blockchain technology, but also trying to use it for good and to solve some of our close that carbon gap a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, it is really about utility in crypto. I mean, that is something that we really need to understand when we think about crypto. It's just not an asset. You might mine some gold, and at the end, you'll have a piece of gold. But with crypto, and particularly Bitcoin, you mine some Bitcoin, and you actually receive a much greater utility, as was discussed. KlimaDAO currently functions on Polygon, which is an L2 of the Ethereum network. So first of all, the footprint on Polygon is much lower. Recent analysis showed that for the lifetime of Polygon, which is a couple years, has been about 90,000 tons. And that's primarily from the checkpointing and bridging operations on Ethereum themselves. But to put that in perspective, that's about roughly an estimated about a yearly tonnage of say like PayPal per year, to give you kind of an estimate. So we're on a much more highly efficient proof of stake chain on Polygon. And what we've done on there is essentially we are aligning economic incentives to help aid the transition into a more green regenerative economy. And what I mean by that is essentially by building the new carbon market on chain, one that is more transparent, one that allows for the market to fairly set prices by concentrating liquidity in such a way that allows anyone essentially to source and retire credits easily, even from your phone. And so we've created this economic incentive early on at our launch, which was roughly about 5-6 months ago, where we created this incentive for people from all around the world to essentially purchase carbon assets, bridge them on chain, and then bond them into our treasury for Klima, which is our native token. And the result of that is over 20 million tons have been bridged on chain to date, and just over 17 million of those tons have been brought into the KlimaDAO treasury. And the effect of that has been through this consistent demand on these carbon credits, which hasn't really been seen before, was that the price of these voluntary carbon credits rapidly increased up to 3x at its peak. And that is really what I mean by aligning economic incentives. We believe that it's very important for our economy not just to be good at accounting for the cost of production, but also to start to account for the cost of destruction as well. That's what's really important. And how we do that is by creating these feedback loops in the economy, right? And carbon itself is not necessarily the perfect measure for this, but it is a very good measure since everything that we do contains carbon. And so, how we're able to do this is in the current voluntary carbon market, it can take anywhere for a few months for an organization to source these credits, to work with a brokerage, to source and retire credits based on the projects. But what we've done was we've brought on over $100 million worth of liquidity into the market on chain. And that is what allows you to instantly go, again, from your phone, to search, find the price for the type of credit that you prefer, say one that's more economically based, where it's cheaper essentially, or one that has more additionality around natural benefits. That'll be a higher price set by the market, and it allow you to just choose the number of credits to match your offsetting needs and retire them instantly. We actually have a campaign right now called Love Letters. So you can visit it at loveletters.klimadao.finance, and it allows you to essentially purchase carbon credits and retire them and write a love letter to the planet. And we're seeing
you guys
all
really
types
awed that.
What's that?
You got a nice awe out of that.
Yeah, and I mean it's a wonderful thing. I mean, people have been retiring on behalf of their children, et cetera. So we've taken this idea of offsetting out of purely the domain of organizations that have a group of professionals that work on this daily, and we've brought it to people's mothers so that they can offset on behalf of their children, or allow people to offset their air travel essentially.
So I think the audience can tell both of you are, I would say, crypto optimists. I'm playing the role of someone who's a little bit more skeptical, but all crypto is not created this equally. There were advertisements that went out today in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, on Facebook, a group of environmentalists calling for the retirement of proof of work coins like Bitcoin, and the transition to a proof of stake. Those are terms a lot of people don't quite understand. How likely is something like that going to happen, particularly with Bitcoin? And in general, how responsible do you think the industry itself can be in sort of regulating its energy usage?
Well, I mean, anyone's free to take Bitcoin and fork it and create whatever version of Bitcoin that you think is best. It ultimately comes down to the market to decide the value of that. And so far, the market has valued the proof of work model of Bitcoin. But more even beyond that, I mean, Ethereum is going through this journey right now, from moving from primarily a proof of work model to proof of stake. And it's difficult. I mean, it's not just changing a few lines of code. There's a lot of considerations, and Ethereum is made up of many brilliant people around the world. And one of the main criticisms is why is it taking so long? And the reason is it's difficult.
I just wanted to address something.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned earlier this first of all, who here knows what proof of work and proof of stake is? Okay, not so many people. It's like more over there, which I don't know why, but okay. So I wanted to address a few things. So you had mentioned, Dan, earlier this comparison to just crypto's energy consumption as a comparison to a sovereign nation, right? So I would just love to take this chance to just debunk that. People just love to compare crypto's energy consumption and, in effect, its environmental impact to that of sovereign nations, which we just heard earlier, right? And I just feel like this doesn't make sense, and I'll give you a few reasons why. So we live in a globalized economy where all of the world's industrial capacity is concentrated in just a handful of nations, and that industrial capacity is what consumes energy. So if crypto is to be compared to anything, it must, I think, be compared to other utilities and other industries. Crypto, just as Cy had mentioned earlier, is a utility. It serves a very specific function. It also is an industry, and it undergoes an industrial process. That would be a like with like comparison. But comparing crypto to that of small rural agrarian nations that import all of its industrial capacity by perhaps the largest industrial exporter in the entire world, China, makes absolutely no sense. So if we do want to get an intuition for where crypto stands, I can give you a lot of statistics, but I won't bore you way too much. So I'll give you the first one. In the United States, household tumble dryers use about 108 terawatt hours of energy a year. Crypto, in particular Bitcoin, uses about 62 terawatt hours of energy a year. But let's take that a step further. So lots of, when we talk about data centers, we got Netflix, we got gaming consoles, we got PlayStation. A lot of you will probably be indulging in one of those things later today. That uses a lot of energy. That uses about over 200 terawatt hours of energy a year. That is over triple what Bitcoin consumes. But let's take that a step further. So when it comes, there's like a lot of flying, there's a lot of traveling happening these days, right? That isn't flying off of cotton candy. That consumes energy as well. So that consumes over 4,000 terawatt hours of energy a year, okay? But the point that I'm trying to make is less about the utility itself and more about the fact that no one is protesting or picketing in front of this hotel about the energy consumption of any of these utilities. And the reason for this is that they have become socially accepted as essential functions for life. They have become tools of human civilization. In comparison, however, crypto hasn't reached that point yet. It hasn't become an essential function for life, and at least not in the developed world. But if we just take a look at perhaps, my earlier presentation, there are 300 million users of crypto worldwide, and not all of those people live in a developed economy where they have ready access to all of the utilities that we take for granted every single day here in the States. Crypto has become an essential tool for people in emerging economies, just as dishwashers, heaters, air conditioners have become for us here in the States. So to your earlier point, Dan, and just like your two previous questions, it really does go back to the societal merit of crypto and just the spectrum of acceptance that this technology has been able to garner in different pockets of the globe.
Yeah, you've got a number of examples. I'm surprised you waited this long to get to them.
I wanted to hear what you were going to say earlier. So
I know you were saying, yeah, a little rope-a-dope. The tumble dryer example hit me hard. Because
I used it this morning and I was like, man, this is going to be something I bring up today.
It's a good one. And I don't know if you source air conditioner usage, but I've seen that plotted out as well, which is 14 times more energy than all of the crypto being mined in the entire world. So it's an extraordinarily salient point. I'm glad that you made it. So in terms of what, let's talk briefly, we've got about 2 minutes. In terms of the role of government, in terms of regulation, is there a role for government oversight? Is there a need for it? There have been lots of, how do you see the role of government in sort of fostering the crypto market, particularly when it comes to the environmental opportunities?
Yeah, I could take that if you want. Okay. So crypto companies have been operating in somewhat of a gray zone for quite a while now with very little strategic oversight and regulatory clarity. But of course that's changing, right? So I think that, you more than anyone, Dan, probably already know this, but on March 9th, President Biden had issued an executive order, calling for the responsible development of digital assets. And, this was a huge signal to the global community that the United States intends to be this leading source of innovation and standards setting for this new technological domain, which is just really exciting. And it also, just to add, there is a significant or substantial portion of that executive order that includes a mandate for the White House Office of Science and Technological Policy. That says that they want this office to just spend time exploring the climate and environmental impacts of distributed ledger technologies and the potential that this technology can have for bringing us closer to a clean energy economy. But of course, these things really can't happen without legislation that follows, right? Or else it's like executive order after executive order and nobody cares. So when it comes to legislation, there is movement in this respect as well. So I believe that it was last Thursday, fact check me, I'm not quite remembering it very well, but I think it was last Thursday, Senators Gillibrand and Senators Loomis, they made this announcement that they're collaborating on a new regulatory framework for regulating digital assets in the foreseeable future. And this can be a really huge deal because you have Gillibrand, who is a New York Democrat, and you have Loomis, who is a Wyoming Republican. And if they succeed in hammering out the details of this potential legislation, it'll be one of the major bipartisan steps, bipartisan attempts to actually pull together a robust framework for digital assets. And that in of itself should be quite celebrated. But of course, there are challenges. There always are challenges. And the big one I would say is really, how do we effectively balance the risks associated with consumer protection, national security, as well as, of course, energy demand with America's global competitiveness. And I just think that there's a lot of measured optimism in this space right now. And I myself am just looking forward to seeing how the appropriate safeguards and protocols are put into place in a way that just empowers greater education and awareness of digital assets, and also just accelerates overall creativity and economic independence in this new technological domain.
Cool. Zy, you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just overall, us in the industry just would really like clarification on some of these issues. A lot of the things that we try to do we're just, we're in gray area most of the time just because we lack these clarifications. And so we think that would be nice. I mean, we're just at the beginning of this. And it's just a little bit to the previous point. It's like it's very easy to kick new technologies when they're new, right? Every technology, I mean, especially where we're at, in Northern California here, and the history that's happened here, it's like any new technology is most inefficient when it begins. And even though Bitcoin might be around, has been around for like 10 years, it really hasn't mattered until the last, few years. And a lot of the innovation is coming out. All the developer activity has really only started a few years ago. So we're really at the beginning of this. And, to look at this and say like, hey, it's not worth it, it's terrible, et cetera, really just throws away all the huge future potential that we have moving forward, and all of the excellent developer activity that has gone into getting us just to this point.
So clearly, we are just at the beginning of the crypto movement. We're at the end of this panel. There's a lot more to say. We will endeavor to say it in our breakout session, in which, Zy, I think you're going to promise to explain NFTs to anyone who asks.
I'll explain NFTs. I'll explain DAOs. I'll explain what it means to be pseudo-anonymous for any of those questions. Yeah, we're at the forefront of not just crypto, but organizational structures and all that. So I hope you join us.
Can I get a round of applause for our panelists?